Bella sat at her desk, the rhythmic hum of the store's overhead lights blending with the faint beeping of registers beyond her office walls. 17 years. 17 years of late nights, early mornings, and a devotion to Haven Mart that had become second nature. She had built this store from the ground up, nurtured it through economic downturns, and adapted to every new corporate initiative without hesitation. And yet, here she was. The email had been curt. Private meeting. 2 p.m. Conference room B. She knew exactly what it meant. By the time she stepped into the sterile, windowless room, Greg Thompson was already seated at the head of the table, his tie just a little too tight, his smirk just a little too wide. HR Director Melissa Harper sat beside him, hands folded neatly over a stack of papers. "Bella, please, have a seat," Greg said, voice oozing with forced sympathy. She took her time, settling into the chair with deliberate ease. She could see it in his eyes, the anticipation, the thrill of finally delivering the blow. "As you know, Haven Mart is undergoing some exciting changes," Greg began, exchanging a glance with Melissa. "We're realigning our business model, focusing on future growth and cutting costs," Bella interjected smoothly. Greg's smile didn't falter, but she noticed the slight twitch in his jaw. "Restructuring," he corrected. "To stay competitive, we have to make difficult decisions. And unfortunately, your position as store manager is being phased out." Melissa slid the severance package forward, her expression carefully neutral. "We value your years of service, Bella, and Haven Mart wants to ensure a smooth transition for you. The package includes 2 weeks' pay per year of service, 3 months of health coverage, and access to career counseling services." Bella exhaled softly, letting the words settle. 17 years, reduced to a few sheets of paper and a handshake. Greg leaned back, waiting. He wanted a reaction, anger, betrayal, maybe even tears. He wanted to see her crack, to watch her scramble for an explanation, to beg for reconsideration. Instead, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made Greg shift ever so slightly in his seat. "I totally understand," she said, her voice even. For the first time, Greg hesitated. Melissa blinked. This was not the response they had expected. "I appreciate your professionalism," Greg said, faltering just a bit. "Of course," Bella said smoothly, folding her hands in her lap. "I've given a lot to this company, and I understand that business is business. You have to do what's best for Haven Mart." Greg nodded, clearly regaining his confidence. "Exactly. We knew you'd see it that way." But he didn't know. He had no idea. Because Bella had been expecting this. She had seen the shift in Greg's demeanor months ago, the way he had started taking credit for her decisions in corporate meetings, the subtle way he had positioned himself as the store's visionary. She had watched as he courted the new district manager, a man who valued fresh leadership and modern perspectives, code for you're too old, too experienced, too entrenched in the old ways. She had seen it all coming. And she had already set her plan in motion. "Well," Greg said, pushing his chair back and standing, "we won't take up too much more of your time. Melissa will walk you through the paperwork and we'll arrange for your departure by the end of the week." Bella rose, smoothing the front of her blouse. "Of course. I'll make sure everything is in order before I go." Greg extended his hand, and she shook it firmly. "It's been a pleasure, Bella," he said, with the warmth of a man who had just secured his victory. She held his gaze, her smile never wavering. "Oh, I'm sure it has," she replied. By the time she returned to her office, the whispers had already started. Employees lingered near the break room, shooting her furtive glances, their conversations halting as she passed. Word traveled fast in retail, and news of her dismissal had spread like wildfire. Her assistant, Carrie, hovered near the doorway, her expression tight with barely contained fury. "They can't do this," Carrie hissed. 17 years, and they just... "It's fine," Bella said lightly, stepping past her and gathering a few personal belongings. "Really, it is." Carrie gaped. "How are you this calm?" Bella glanced at her, amused. "Would you rather I throw a stapler?" Carrie threw up her hands. At the very least. Bella chuckled, placing a framed photo of her old team into her bag. Trust me, Carrie. Everything is exactly as it should be. The younger woman frowned, sensing something beneath Bella's measured tone. You knew this was coming, didn't you? Bella didn't answer. Instead, she picked up a folder from her desk, a file she had been compiling for months. Inside were carefully documented vendor relationships, contract details, and a comprehensive breakdown of the store's most valuable partnerships. She tapped the folder against her palm, then slipped it into her bag. Carrie narrowed her eyes. Bella, what are you planning? Bella smiled, stepping toward the door. I'll see you around, Carrie. And with that, she walked out, leaving Haven Mart's walls behind her. That evening, Bella sat at her favorite cafe, a quiet corner booth that had become her retreat during long shifts. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the low hum of conversation around her, but her focus was on the sleek, leather-bound planner in front of her. Her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. Jackson Carter. A slow smile curved her lips as she picked up. Jackson, she greeted smoothly. Bella, his deep, measured voice came through the line. Is it done? She ran a finger along the edge of her coffee cup. Just like we planned. There was a brief pause, then a satisfied chuckle. You really are something else, Bella. She leaned back, the weight of the day slipping off her shoulders. So, when do we sign the contract? Soon, Jackson said. But let's meet first. The streetlights flickered as Bella pulled into the underground parking garage of Grand Emporium's corporate headquarters. The air was cool with the lingering scent of pavement after an afternoon rain, and the low hum of the city vibrated through her car as she cut the engine. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her auburn hair was swept into a sleek bun, and her sharp navy blue blazer was a statement, powerful, in control, untouched by today's events. The woman staring back at her wasn't a former store manager. She was something much more. She stepped out, heels clicking against the concrete as she made her way toward the private elevator. A security guard nodded as she passed, pressing a keycard against the scanner to grant her access. As the door slid shut, Bella allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. They thought they had blindsided her. They thought they had won. But they had no idea she had been orchestrating this moment for weeks. The elevator opened with a soft chime, revealing Grand Emporium's sleek, modern executive suite. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, and the minimalist decor spoke of money, power, and a business that knew exactly what it was doing. Jackson Carter's office was at the far end of the hallway. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in a tailored black dress, glanced up as Bella approached. Ms. Dawson, she greeted with a nod. He's expecting you. Bella stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. Jackson Carter, CEO of Grand Emporium, stood by his expansive window, hands in his pockets. Tall, with a lean, calculating presence, he turned as she entered, his sharp blue eyes assessing her with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Bella, he said smoothly. Right on time. She moved toward the leather chair across from his desk but didn't sit. Instead, she set her bag down, unbuttoning her blazer as she met his gaze. I don't waste time, Jackson. We both know that. A chuckle rumbled from his chest. No, we don't. Have a seat. She did, folding one leg over the other as he took his place behind his desk. So, he said, steepling his fingers. Tell me exactly how this all went down. Bella leaned back, exhaling softly. Greg Thompson called me into a meeting with HR, played the usual corporate game. 17 years of service meant nothing in the end. She tilted. The days that followed were eerily quiet. It was the kind of quiet that came before a storm, before the first raindrop struck the ground, before the wind picked up speed and ripped through everything in its path. Bella could feel it, the tension hanging in the air, the weight of the inevitable. And she relished every moment of it. She spent the next few days in methodical preparation. Packing her belongings was a slow, deliberate process. She wanted to savor this. Her last few days within these walls. Each item she placed in her box felt like a step closer to something greater, something that Greg and the rest of them had never seen coming. Meanwhile, Haven Mart was business as usual, or at least that's what they believed. Employees whispered behind the aisles, stealing glances at her as if expecting her to break down at any moment. They had seen plenty of people let go before, long-time employees dismissed like they were nothing, their faces flushed with humiliation as they packed up their desks. But Bella? She was different. She didn't leave in a storm of anger. She didn't cry. She simply continued as if nothing had changed. Greg, smug and victorious, was nowhere to be seen for most of the week. He was likely in his office, celebrating his latest move, basking in the glory of eliminating what he thought was an obstacle to his vision. He had always been predictable, arrogant, short-sighted, convinced that his way was the only way. Bella let him believe that. By Wednesday, she had finished documenting everything. Every key vendor, every contract that had once been under her control, every critical relationship that had kept Haven Mart afloat. She knew Greg had no idea how much he had relied on her. He thought her job was just numbers and reports, but Bella had been the foundation, the silent force that had kept everything running seamlessly. And by the time he realized that, it would be far too late. Thursday morning, Bella arrived at the store, her movements as measured as ever. The moment she stepped inside, she saw Carrie waiting for her near the back office, arms crossed, eyes filled with curiosity and suspicion. "You're really leaving tomorrow, huh?" Carrie asked, leaning against the door frame. Bella gave a small smile, setting her bag down on her desk. "That's the plan." Carrie studied her for a long moment. "You're too calm." "It's weird." Bella chuckled. "Would you rather I throw a tantrum in the middle of the store?" "Honestly, I wouldn't blame you," Carrie admitted. "After everything you've done for this place, Greg just..." She exhaled sharply, frustration evident in her tone. "He doesn't deserve to win." Bella picked up a file from her desk, flipping through it absent-mindedly. "Who said he's winning?" Carrie's eyes narrowed. "Oh, you're definitely up to something." Bella glanced at her with an amused smirk. "And if I was?" Carrie straightened. "Then I'd hope it involves making his life miserable." Bella chuckled again, but said nothing. Instead, she closed the file, placed it in her bag, and reached for her keycard. Greg was in his office when she knocked. When she stepped inside, he didn't bother hiding the smug expression on his face. "Bella," he said, feigning politeness. "I was just about to call you in." She tilted her head slightly. "Oh!" He leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers together. "Just wanted to say that I appreciate your cooperation this week. Most people don't take these transitions so well." Bella smiled, sweet, unreadable. "Well, I've always been professional, Greg." Greg exhaled, as if satisfied that his little game had gone exactly as planned. "Good. I'll need your keycard and store credentials before you leave today." "Of course," Bella said, pulling the keycard from her pocket. She set it on his desk, her fingers lingering on the plastic for just a moment before she pulled away. Greg picked it up, twirling it between his fingers. "I'll be honest, Bella. I didn't think you'd take this so well." "Why?" she asked, her tone as even as ever. He shrugged. 17 years is a long time. Some people don't handle change very well." Bella simply smiled, tilting her head slightly. "You're right. Some people don't." She turned to leave. Greg called after her. "You've got a bright future ahead, Bella. Maybe you'll even thank me someday." Bella paused in the doorway. For a moment, she considered it, turning around and telling him exactly what was about to happen, watching his arrogant expression crumble in real time. But she didn't. Instead, she smiled over her shoulder. "Oh, I think I will." And with that, she walked out. That evening, Bella sat in her living room, sipping a glass of wine as she reviewed the final details of her transition. The contract with Grand Emporium was signed. The supplier deal was officially in motion. And by Monday morning, the bomb would drop. Greg had no idea that his biggest mistake wasn't letting her go. It was underestimating her. She glanced at her phone, the screen lighting up with a message from Jackson. "Jackson, Everything is set. By noon on Monday, Haven Mart stock is going to take a hit they won't recover from. Looking forward to seeing how they scramble. Bella smirked, taking another sip of her wine before responding. Bella, oh, they'll scramble. But it won't help them. She set the phone down, exhaling slowly. It was done. There was nothing left to do but wait. The storm was coming, and Bella was ready to watch it hit. Friday morning arrived with the usual hum of routine. Bella walked into Haven Mart for the last time, passing the familiar aisles, the employees who still seemed stunned that she was actually leaving. Greg was nowhere in sight. Not that it mattered. She walked into the back office one last time, gathering her final few items. Her nameplate, a framed picture of her old team, a coffee mug she had used for years. Carrie appeared in the doorway. So, this is it? Bella smiled, glancing around. Looks like it. Carrie sighed. It's gonna be weird without you here. You'll adjust, Bella said, setting her bag over her shoulder. Carrie hesitated, then asked, Bella, what's next for you? Bella met her gaze, her smile deepening. Something better. She stepped past her, walking toward the front of the store. The automatic doors slid open, the warm breeze brushing against her face as she stepped outside. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Bella sat on her balcony, watching the city glow beneath her. She could feel it, the shift, the moment before everything changed. Greg thought he had won. But in 72 hours, he would realize the truth. Bella hadn't just left Haven Mart. She had taken their future with her. And when Monday came, they would regret ever letting her go. Monday morning arrived, crisp and clear. The city hummed with the energy of a new workweek, but for Bella, this day was different. It wasn't just another Monday, it was the day everything changed. She sat in the back seat of the sleek black town car that Grand Emporium had sent for her, the leather cool beneath her fingers as she scrolled through her phone. She had been awake since dawn, but she felt no fatigue, no nerves. Just a quiet, simmering satisfaction. The first wave had already hit. As the car weaved through downtown traffic, Bella refreshed her news feed. There it was, splashed across every major retail publication. Grand Emporium secures exclusive contract with Haven Mart's former top supplier. Haven Mart's best-selling product line no longer available, Grand Emporium takes the lead. Bella tapped one of the articles, scanning the opening lines. In a stunning development, Grand Emporium has officially signed an exclusive distribution deal with the supplier behind Haven Mart's highest-grossing product line, a move expected to shake up the competitive retail landscape. The deal, which reportedly slipped through Haven Mart's grasp due to an internal oversight, now positions Grand Emporium as the dominant force in the market. Analysts predict a sharp impact on Haven Mart's quarterly revenue projections, with early estimates forecasting a 9% stock dip by noon. Bella smirked. A 9% drop? And that was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jackson Carter. Jackson, stocks already falling. Haven Mart Corporate is in full meltdown mode. Should we send Greg a fruit basket? Bella chuckled, fingers dancing over the keyboard. Bella, no. Let's give him time to process his failure first. The car pulled up to Grand Emporium's headquarters. The sleek glass tower gleamed under the morning sun, reflecting the skyline. Bella stepped out, straightening her blazer, heels clicking against the pavement as she strode through the entrance. This was her world now. Inside, the energy was electric. Employees moved with purpose, a buzz of excitement in the air. Everyone had seen the headlines. Everyone knew today was a turning point. Bella made her way to the executive floor, where Jackson was waiting for her outside the conference room. He grinned. You have perfect timing. She raised an eyebrow. What's happening now? He gestured to the glass-walled meeting room. Inside, a panel of executives huddled around a large screen displaying live market updates. Jackson leaned in slightly. Haven Mart's trying to control the narrative. Their PR team just released a statement saying they chose not to renew the contract because they're moving in a different direction. Bella laughed softly. Classic damage control. Jackson smirked. But no one's buying it. Investors are panicking. Their CEO is probably throwing a fit as we speak. Bella nodded toward the screen. How bad is the drop now? Jackson folded his arms. 11% and still falling. She exhaled through her nose. Good. He gestured for her to follow him. Come on. I want you to watch this next part live. Meanwhile, across town, inside Haven Mart's corporate headquarters, chaos reigned. Richard Donovan, Haven Mart's CEO, stood at the head of the crisis meeting, eyes dark with frustration. The room was tense, filled with executives frantically analyzing reports, trying to assess the full damage. Greg Thompson sat stiffly at the far end of the table, his fingers tightening around his pen. He had expected Monday to be just another victory lap. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare. How the hell did this happen? Donovan demanded, his voice sharp. A finance executive cleared his throat nervously. The contract renewal deadline passed unnoticed. It seems the previous store manager was responsible for handling vendor relations, and Greg flinched. Donovan's eyes narrowed. And? The executive swallowed. And without her oversight, it, wasn't renewed in time. Grand Emporium moved in before we even realized. The room fell into stunned silence. Greg felt the weight of the stares boring into him. He knew what they were thinking. He had been the one to push Bella out. He had been the one who had claimed he could modernize the company's leadership. And now, because of him, they had lost their biggest product line. Donovan's voice was cold. Do you have any idea what this means for us? A marketing executive hesitated. It's already affecting store traffic. Customers are coming in expecting to buy the product, and when they find out it's no longer available, they're leaving. Another executive added, some of our biggest vendor partners are reevaluating their deals with us. They see this as a sign of instability. Donovan slammed his fist on the table. So, in other words, we're bleeding revenue and losing trust? No one dared to respond. Greg forced himself to sit up straighter. We can fix this, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. We can renegotiate with the supplier. Offer them a better deal. The finance executive winced. That won't be possible. Greg's stomach dropped. Why not? The executive exhaled slowly. Because the contract Grand Emporium signed is exclusive. The supplier can't legally work with us anymore. Greg's mouth went dry. Donovan ran a hand down his face, visibly furious. So, you're telling me that we lost our best product line because you let go of the one person who was keeping this company from imploding? Greg had no answer. Back at Grand Emporium, Bella sat comfortably in her new executive office, watching the fallout unfold. Her assistant entered, setting a fresh cup of coffee on the desk. The latest report just came in. Haven Mart stock has dropped to 14% down since opening. Looks like it's stabilizing there. Bella picked up the cup, taking a slow sip. 14% is a death sentence in this industry. Her assistant nodded. And it's only Monday. Bella smiled. Exactly. She turned her attention back to her screen, where live financial analysis played in the background. Analysts were already debating whether Haven Mart could recover from this. Some speculated they might attempt a buyout of a smaller brand to compensate. Others theorized that upper management would see massive restructuring in the coming weeks. Bella didn't care what their solution was. She had already won. Her phone buzzed again. A new email, marked urgent. From Richard Donovan. Subject: let's discuss a potential collaboration. Bella stared at it for a moment, then leaned back in her chair, exhaling softly. It had taken less than a day. She clicked forward and typed a single response to her legal team. Too late. Then she closed her laptop, stood, and walked to the window. The city stretched before her, bathed in the golden glow of the late afternoon sun. She had spent years building Haven Mart's success. And now, in a single move, she had taken it all away. Greg had thought he was removing an obstacle. Instead, he had created his biggest threat. Bella smiled to herself, sipping her coffee. Monday had been fun. And it was only just beginning. At Haven Mart's corporate headquarters, the mood was anything but composed. Greg Thompson sat stiffly at the long mahogany conference table, fingers tapping nervously against his notepad. Around him, Voices clashed in a chaotic swirl, executives barking orders, analysts scrambling to mitigate the damage, and PR representatives throwing out hastily crafted statements in an attempt to control the growing media firestorm. "We need answers." Richard Donovan's voice boomed over the clamor, the CEO's face red with frustration. "How the hell did this happen?" Greg swallowed hard. He had known this meeting was going to be brutal, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer level of panic in the room. "We're looking into potential negotiations with the supplier," an executive from procurement spoke up hesitantly. "If we offer them a more lucrative deal, we might be able to." "We can't," another voice cut in sharply. It was Jason Reed, the company's general counsel, rubbing his temples as if he had a headache that wouldn't quit. "The contract Grand Emporium signed is ironclad. Even if we offered double, they can't break it without facing legal repercussions." Greg felt the blood drain from his face. "Then we find another supplier," Richard snapped. "One that can match." "Not that simple, sir," the VP of merchandising interjected, flipping through a thick binder of reports. "This isn't just any product line. It accounted for nearly 20% of our annual sales. That supplier had unique formulas, exclusive branding rights, and a distribution network tailored specifically for our stores." He exhaled sharply. "Customers aren't going to just accept a substitute." Richard slammed a fist on the table, his jaw tight. "Then what do we do? Just sit back and watch our stock plummet?" Greg, who had been trying to remain as invisible as possible, finally forced himself to speak. "We can launch a damage control campaign. Make it seem like this was a strategic move, that we chose to part ways with the supplier because we're focusing on other product lines." There was a long silence. Then, Richard's glare pierced through him like a knife. "Do you think our investors are idiots, Greg?" he asked coldly. "Because right now, that's the only explanation for why you're sitting here and still breathing." Greg stiffened. His skin burned, but he refused to let his panic show. "We could do temporary markdowns on competing products," another executive chimed in cautiously. "Try to redirect customer demand to something else while we source a new supplier." "It won't work," came another exhausted voice. Greg turned to see Denise Carter, head of consumer insights, who had been silent up until now. She looked pale, her eyes scanning the latest data reports with a grim expression. "Customers are already reacting," she said, voice steady despite the tension. "Social media is exploding with complaints. People are walking into stores expecting to buy the product, and when they find out it's gone, they're leaving without purchasing anything else." She flipped the report around for the room to see. "Sales are down 12% since this morning. That's not just from lost product sales, it's from decreased basket sizes across the board. Customers are punishing us for this decision by taking their entire business elsewhere." Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "So, you're telling me that not only did we lose our best-selling product, but we also managed to train our most loyal customers to go to our biggest competitor instead?" Silence. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered. Greg clenched his fists under the table, panic clawing at his chest. This was spiraling faster than he'd expected. "We need to get ahead of this," Richard said at last, his voice dangerously low. He turned to the PR director. "Issue a formal statement. Make it sound like this was an intentional shift in strategy." The PR director nodded, scribbling down notes. "And as for our supply chain?" Richard's eyes flicked toward Greg, cold and razor-sharp. Greg straightened. We're working on it, sir. I'll reach out to our vendors and—" "You'd better," Richard interrupted. "Because if you don't fix this, you won't have a job by the end of the week." Greg swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. But deep down, he knew. There was no fixing this. Meanwhile, across town, Bella sat in her executive office, watching the collapse unfold. She had set up a secondary screen on her desk, where a live news feed streamed updates on Haven Mart's implosion. The headline scrawling across the ticker at the bottom of the screen made her smirk. Haven Mart suffers major stock hit as product shortages drive customers to competitors. She sipped her coffee, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. The knock at her door was expected. "Come in," she called. Jackson entered, looking amused. "I assume you've been watching?" Bella set her mug down, nodding. "They're in free fall." Jackson pulled up a chair, his grin widening. My sources at Havenmart say Greg is getting eaten alive in the crisis meetings. He's trying to convince them he has a plan, but everyone knows he's the one who caused this mess. Bella's lips twitched. That's what happens when you make reckless decisions. Jackson leaned forward. You think they'll fire him? Bella exhaled, tilting her head slightly. If they're smart? Yes, but they won't do it immediately. Firing him now would be admitting that they made a massive mistake. They'll squeeze him dry first, make him take the blame for every bad financial quarter until they have no choice but to cut him loose. Jackson let out a low whistle. Brutal. Bella arched a brow. Not as brutal as what he did to me. Jackson chuckled. True. But I have to say, you orchestrated this perfectly. Bella smiled. I didn't just leave, Jackson. I took their biggest asset with me. He laughed, shaking his head in admiration. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Bella. She smirked, picking up her coffee again. Smart man. That afternoon, Havenmart Corporate received another devastating blow. Resignations. Not just any resignations. Waves of them. Key department managers, logistics coordinators, and senior store supervisors, the backbone of the company, started handing in their notices. Why? Because Bella had made sure every single one of them had an offer waiting at Grand Emporium. Carrie, Bella's former assistant, had texted her earlier that morning. Carrie, Greg's freaking out. People are quitting left and right. He's trying to convince them to stay, but nobody trusts him anymore. This place is falling apart. Bella had simply replied, Good. Let it. By the end of the day, Havenmart stock had officially dropped 17%. Their board of directors was reportedly in emergency meetings. Greg Thompson had spent most of the afternoon pacing his office, sweating through his expensive dress shirt as his phone exploded with calls from furious executives. Bella, on the other hand, was celebrating. Jackson had arranged a small gathering at a rooftop bar, a toast to mark the beginning of Havenmart's decline and Bella's rise. She stood at the edge of the terrace, glass of champagne in hand, watching the city lights stretch endlessly before her. Jackson clinked his glass against hers. To the most brilliant power move I've ever seen. Bella smiled, taking a slow sip. She had spent years building Havenmart's success. And now, in just a few days, she had ripped it away. Greg had thought he was eliminating a problem when he forced her out. But instead, he had created his worst nightmare. She turned to Jackson, eyes gleaming. This is only the beginning. The storm had settled, but the wreckage was undeniable. Havenmart was no longer the confident, towering retail giant it had once been. It was bleeding, struggling to keep its head above water while Grand Emporium surged ahead, filling the void left behind. Bella watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. She sat at her desk, reviewing a new round of reports detailing the latest numbers. Grand Emporium stores had seen a 14% increase in foot traffic, with projected revenues set to outpace Havenmart's quarterly earnings for the first time in a decade. It was happening faster than even she had predicted. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Jackson Carter stepped inside, his usual confident smirk in place. I thought you'd like to see this. He handed her a printed email. Bella's eyes scanned the subject line. Let's discuss a potential collaboration. She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. Richard Donovan actually thinks he can undo this? Jackson shrugged, settling into the chair across from her. He's desperate. Havenmart's board is demanding solutions, and they don't have many options left. Their market value is still tanking. They lost major vendor partnerships. And now, thanks to your little recruiting efforts, they don't even have the staff to stabilize operations. Bella tapped her fingers thoughtfully against the desk. What exactly is he proposing? Jackson smirked. He didn't say outright, but it's obvious they want you back in some capacity. Consulting, crisis management, something to patch up their mess. Bella tilted her head, considering. And Greg? Jackson's smirk widened. Word is, he's been sidelined. They haven't fired him yet, but they've effectively removed him from decision-making. He's drowning, and no one is throwing him a life raft. Bella exhaled through her nose. How poetic. For a moment, she let herself imagine it, walking back into Haven Mart, watching the stunned faces of those who had dismissed her, knowing she held all the power now. But the thought was fleeting. Haven Mart was the past. She had already won. Bella took a pen, scribbled 2 words across the bottom of the email, and slid it back to Jackson. Too late. Jackson grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. Across the city, in a glass-walled conference room at Haven Mart's headquarters, Richard Donovan was seething. He stared at his inbox, jaw tightening at the curt reply from Bella Dawson. Too late. The words stung worse than any financial report, any market projection. Because they weren't just words, they were a death sentence. He looked around at his executive team. The mood in the room was grim. Greg Thompson sat in stiff silence, avoiding eye contact. Well, Richard said, voice dangerously calm. That was our best shot at fixing this. The CFO cleared his throat. We could still attempt a media pivot. Reframe this as a restructuring opportunity, bring in new talent, reinforce brand confidence. Richard shot him a sharp look. Do you really think a few marketing buzzwords are going to fix this disaster? The man swallowed hard, looking away. Another executive hesitated before speaking. Sir, we need to face facts. We underestimated Bella. We let go of the one person who held our supplier relationships together, the one person our employees trusted. And now, we're paying the price. Richard exhaled slowly, gripping the arms of his chair. So, what do you suggest? A heavy silence followed. Finally, someone said the words no one wanted to say. Maybe, we need to let Greg go. Greg stiffened. Now, hold on. It's the only way, the executive continued. The board wants accountability. They want a scapegoat. And you're the one who pushed Bella out. Greg's face turned red. I made a strategic decision. How was I supposed to know she'd? That's the problem, Greg, Richard interrupted, his voice ice-cold. You didn't know. Silence. Greg clenched his jaw, glancing around at the faces in the room. None of them were on his side. He had lost. Fine, he said, forcing the word through gritted teeth. If this company wants a scapegoat, so be it. But don't pretend this is going to fix everything. Richard didn't respond. Greg pushed his chair back and walked out of the room. Meanwhile, Bella was celebrating. That evening, she attended a high-profile retail leadership conference, an event where industry executives gathered to discuss trends, strategies, and the future of commerce. She was no longer a store manager in the crowd. She was the keynote speaker. As she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. The introduction was brief. Everyone already knew who she was and what she had done. Bella looked out at the packed auditorium, feeling the weight of every eye on her. And she thrived in it. She began. 17 years. That's how long I dedicated my career to a company that, in the end, saw me as disposable. The audience was rapt. They underestimated me, she continued. They assumed loyalty meant complacency. They thought that experience and knowledge could be replaced by fresh leadership, by people who understood spreadsheets, but not strategy. She let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. But the biggest mistake they made? Her lips curved into a knowing smile. They thought I was just an employee. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. They didn't realize that while they were making decisions, I was building relationships. While they were focused on quarterly reports, I was building long-term partnerships. They let me go, thinking I was just one person. But what they didn't understand was that I was the bridge holding everything together. She let her gaze sweep across the room, pausing just long enough to make her next words hit harder. And when you destroy the bridge that connects you to your success, you don't just lose one person. You lose everything. The applause started slowly, but within moments, the room erupted. She owned the stage. She had taken everything they thought she couldn't. And she wasn't done yet. At the post-conference gala, Jackson Carter raised a glass in her honor. To Bella Dawson, he said, voice filled with admiration. For proving that experience, loyalty, and intelligence are worth more than corporate politics. A chorus of agreement followed, glasses clinking as people toasted to the woman who had turned the industry on its head. Bella sipped her champagne, letting the taste linger. She had spent years making Haven Mart successful, and now she had rewritten the rules. Greg had thought he was getting rid of a liability. Instead, he had created his greatest competitor. And now, as she stood at the top, watching Haven Mart crumble below her, she realized something. She didn't just win. She had changed the game. 3 months had passed since Bella's strategic exit from Haven Mart, and in that time, the retail world had shifted dramatically. What had once seemed like an unshakable corporation was now a company in freefall. And Bella? She had become the name everyone was talking about. The transition from store manager to Grand Emporium's regional director of operations had been seamless. Under her leadership, store revenues had surged, supplier partnerships flourished, and most notably, Haven Mart had continued to bleed. The final blow wasn't just about watching them crumble. It was about owning the narrative. And tonight, she would. The conference hall was packed. Industry executives, journalists, and investors filled the massive ballroom, all gathered for one of the biggest retail leadership events of the year. The stage was set with towering LED screens, displaying the event's theme: Retail Leadership in the Age of Change. Bella adjusted the microphone clipped to her dress, standing behind the curtain as the event coordinator gave the final countdown. "All right, Ms. Dawson, you're up in 60 seconds, the woman said with a polite smile. Bella nodded, exhaling slowly. She was ready. The announcer's voice rang out. "Please welcome to the stage, Bella Dawson, Regional Director of Grand Emporium." Applause erupted as she stepped onto the stage. She paused, taking in the sight of hundreds of professionals seated before her, many of whom had once dismissed her as nothing more than a middle manager. And now, they hung on her every word. She began. 17 years ago, I started my journey in retail. Like many of you, I believed in the idea that hard work, loyalty, and dedication would be rewarded. A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. But as we all know, that's not always how it works. The room stilled. I spent those 17 years building relationships, streamlining operations, and making sure my company thrived. And then, one day, I was told that I was no longer needed. There it was. The truth laid bare. But what they didn't realize, Bella continued, her voice measured, was that I wasn't just a store manager. I was the reason their business functioned. I was the reason their profit soared. I was the reason their biggest supplier trusted them in the first place. She let that sink in before delivering the final, devastating line. And when they let me go, I didn't just walk away. She smiled, slow and knowing. I made sure they felt it. A ripple of laughter and applause swept through the audience. She had their complete attention. Leadership isn't about a title, she went on. It's about understanding your worth. And when a company fails to recognize that, you take your knowledge, your skills, and your power somewhere that will. The applause swelled. And that, Bella said, is how you turn a betrayal into your greatest success. The audience rose to their feet. A standing ovation. She had won. After the speech, the gala began. Champagne flowed, conversations buzzed, and industry insiders flocked to Bella. "You absolutely dominated that stage," Jackson Carter said, clinking his glass against hers. She smirked. It was a long time coming. As they spoke, an unfamiliar man approached, wearing an expensive navy suit. "Ms. Dawson," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Adrian Wells, investment analyst. I have to say, what you pulled off with Haven Mart. Incredible. You've completely reshaped the competitive landscape." Bella shook his hand, a polite smile on her lips. "Thank you, Adrian." But it wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching them a lesson. Adrian chuckled. "Well, lesson learned. Their quarterly reports just dropped. Another 12% loss in revenue. Investors are fleeing." Bella's smile widened. "I expected as much." Adrian leaned in slightly. "And between you and me? The rumor is Haven Mart's board is looking for a new CEO." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Jackson smirked. "Wouldn't it be ironic if they tried to offer you the position?" Bella laughed, shaking her head. "Not interested." Adrian grinned. Well, if you ever want to go bigger, I know plenty of firms who would kill to have you in an executive seat. Bella held his gaze. I'll keep that in mind. She had options now. Power, control, and most importantly, she had the final say in her own future. For years, Haven Mart had dictated her worth. Now, she set the terms. Later that night, Bella returned to her penthouse suite, kicking off her heels as she poured herself a glass of whiskey. She pulled up her laptop, curiosity getting the best of her. She typed Greg Thompson into her email search. Sure enough, an unread message sat in her inbox. Subject, a personal request. From Greg Thompson. Bella exhaled, taking a slow sip of her drink before opening it. Bella, I know we haven't spoken since you left, but I wanted to reach out. Things at Haven Mart have changed. I won't lie to you, I miscalculated. I made mistakes. And now I find myself at a crossroads. I was wondering if we could talk. I could use your insight. Maybe we can put the past behind us. Let me know if you'd be open to a conversation. Greg. Bella let out a slow, amused laugh. The man who had so gleefully pushed her out of her career, the man who had expected her to crumble, was now asking for her help. She let the moment sink in, rolling the whiskey between her fingers. Then, without hesitation, she dragged the email to the trash. No reply. No second chances. He had underestimated her. And now he could live with the consequences. Bella leaned back in her chair, staring out at the glittering city skyline. She had started this journey with nothing but her experience, her instincts, and a deep sense of betrayal. And now, she had everything. The industry knew her name. Grand Emporium was thriving under her leadership. And Haven Mart? It was on its knees. She took another sip of whiskey, smiling to herself. She had always known that Monday would be fun. Bella sat in her executive office, the city skyline stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The glow of streetlights reflected off the glass, the world below humming with life. A year ago, she had left Haven Mart for good. Now, she was seated at the top of Grand Emporium's corporate empire, reviewing the latest quarterly reports. She didn't just survive, she thrived. Her stores had expanded into Haven Mart's key territories, undercutting their market share at every turn. Suppliers now preferred her, vendors gave her the best deals, and customers had followed her leadership with loyalty that Haven Mart never could have imagined. The latest figures told the full story. Grand Emporium's revenue was up 23%. Haven Mart's had dropped another 15%. It was over for them. Bella leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. She had outplayed them at every turn. They had thrown her away like she was nothing now. They were the ones struggling to stay afloat. And she had made sure of it. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she said, closing the report. Her assistant, Marissa, stepped inside, a white envelope in hand. This just arrived for you, Ms. Dawson. Bella raised an eyebrow, reaching for it. Who's it from? Marissa hesitated. It's from Haven Mart. Bella's fingers paused on the envelope, but only for a second. She smirked. Interesting. She opened it slowly, unfolding the crisp piece of paper inside. To Bella Dawson. From Haven Mart Corporate Offices. Subject, Career Opportunity. Dear Ms. Dawson, we are currently undergoing a major restructuring and are seeking experienced, visionary leadership to guide us through this transition. Given your extensive history with our company and your proven industry expertise, we would love the opportunity to discuss a potential role at Haven Mart. Please let us know a convenient time to connect. Best regards. Haven Mart Executive Hiring Team. Bella read the letter twice, shaking her head in pure amusement. She had destroyed them. And now they wanted her back. She chuckled under her breath. Unbelievable. Marissa tilted her head. So, what's the offer? Bella set the letter down, smirking. They want me to come back. Help them rebuild. Marissa blinked. Are they serious? Bella laughed, shaking her head. Oh, they're serious. Desperate but serious. Marissa hesitated. Are you going to respond? Bella exhaled, leaning back in her chair. A year ago, she might have considered it. She might have wanted to return just to watch them squirm, to make them regret every second of what they had done. But now? Now, they didn't even deserve her attention. She picked up the letter, crumpled it into a tight ball, and tossed it straight into the trash. Marissa grinned. That's what I thought. Bella smiled, standing and stretching her arms. Havenmart is dead weight, Marissa. Let them sink. Marissa nodded. Anything else you need before I head out? Bella glanced at the time. No, go home. Enjoy your night. As Marissa left, Bella turned back toward her window, the city lights glowing beneath her. Havenmart had underestimated her. Greg had betrayed her. And now? She had the last laugh. She had built something better, something stronger, and they were nothing more than a cautionary tale. She picked up her glass of whiskey, taking a slow sip as she gazed at the skyline. She had always known Monday would be fun. And now every day was.